Are we going into recession? I'm Hayden Ross from Pathway Financial Planners. You've probably seen in the news lately this latest talk that the Australian economy could be heading into recession. What does that mean? Well, recession technically means that we go backwards for two consecutive quarters, for example, half a year. And what's causing it? You all would have noticed this increasing in costs that's happening in every part of our life, whether it's a cup of coffee or whether it's at the grocery store. And that's really dangerous in an economic sense. And through history, it seemed to cause one of the most issues of any sort of economic events we can have. Economies throughout the world, governments are really quick at trying to reduce the rising cost of living. And how do they do that? A range of ways, but mainly through higher interest rates. And so what does that do? We've got less money to spend elsewhere, so it crushes consumption, and governments will take that over inflation going out of control any day of the week. That's the position that we find ourselves in. So if we do happen to move into recession, which I think a lot of economists have at about a 50-50 chance at the moment, what are some tips that we can do to get ourselves through personally that sort of environment? So our first tip would be is we need to secure our income where we can. In a recession environment, generally unemployment increases, or if we're self-employed, people have less money to spend. Any steps we can take to secure our job or take more secure employment, I think is something worth considering in this sort of environment. The second one on the cost side of things is, look, a lot of us over recent years, I think, have accumulated extra costs and direct debits. Like we have shoes of probably recent times, things like Netflix and Spotify and all these things that we've picked up along the way. So just taking stock of what we need of those and a bit of a clean out of the budget, I think it's a good time to do that. The other thing to consider is a number of costs, or things like insurance in particular, the level of cover we have increases with inflation each year. So this year that might be a 7% increase in our cover and in our associated costs for that. When we get those renewal notices, we need to consider, do we need another 7% of cover, or because that's really going to translate into a higher cost. Just being a bit more active on things like that is an important step to take also. But these sort of environments, they also bring opportunities. I think the key thing is we've got to keep our financial plans moving forward and keep taking action, because if we just put our hands over our ears and do nothing, we really set ourselves back from our long-term goals. But I think in this sort of environment, we definitely need to adjust more regularly. So keeping a handle on our cash flow and making any adjustments to our plan probably needs to be a bit more active as economic conditions are changing a little bit more at the moment. And the final tip I would have is if you have a mortgage, obviously interest rates are increasing pretty quickly, and so that's becoming a bigger cost of your budget on a regular basis. So just keep an eye on the interest rate, because generally banks and financial institutions give better rates to newer customers, and existing loans can become unaffordable pretty quickly and out of touch with the markets. A percent interest rate difference on a few $100,000 of a mortgage can be a few $1,000s a year that's better off in your budget rather than in the bank's pockets. There's a few tips for me in managing an environment such as this, where a recession is a risk at some point this year. If you want help living your best life, please reach out to me at Pathway Financial Planners.